All right, sound checks are over. This is a real take. We're going to do something completely and totally different, seriously different. Um, when I used to take my bikes to various and sundry local motorcycle shows of different sizes, usually with a group of friends, 4 or 5 of us all having British bikes, we'd go there and set up in an area and take our folding chairs with us and sit there and talk to people who came by to look at the bikes. And if somebody came along who was really interested and wanted to talk and ask questions, and uh, we'd say, "Come on, have a seat, kick back, relax." We'd sit there and talk. And sooner or later, I would say to them, "Tell me a story." And they'd look at me like, "What do you mean?" I said, "Tell me a story." Every biker has a story. Every biker, we all have a story. The story, the time you didn't get a ticket, the time you should have gotten a ticket, the time you did get a ticket, the time you helped somebody, the time somebody helped you, the greatest ride in the world, the worst day on a motorcycle you can ever remember. There's all kinds of stories out there, and I know you got one. And they'd say, "Well, there was this time." And from that point, we would hear some of the neatest stories that were so much fun, you just can't imagine. And thinking back on that with some friends the other day, I wish that I had recorded those stories. I wish I had made notes on those stories. Heck, wish I remember those stories. And so I was thinking, my gosh, I've got 1,100 people watching these YouTube things of mine for reasons unknown. But there's 1,100 stories out there. And I'm going to say to you, tell me a story. With today's technology, you can just put your iPhone, telephone, whatever phone on record and then send it off as an email. It doesn't have to be written. You don't have to write it or type it or anything like that. Just tell me a story and send it to me. Email, text is a little bit more cumbersome. I don't know if you can talk into the notes function and then send off verbal notes. 40 years in computers and I can barely run my iPhone. So I know the technology is there in our hands, in your hands, for you to tell me a story. So think on it. Now, to get this thing rolling, I'm going to tell you a couple stories. Okay. So stand by. First of all, I got lots of stories. I'm not going to tell you about watching a pretty girl and walking into a mountain wearing a Harley Davidson t shirt. I'm not going to tell you that story. And I'm not going to tell you the story of the time I walked into a biker bar by mistake. I'm not going to tell you that story. I'm not going to tell you the story about the clown on the Moto Gazette. I'm not going to tell you about that one. I might someday. These are all good stories. Right now, I'm going to tell you, all right, two stories. This one goes back to about 1976 or so. I was still living in Virginia, had not moved to Phoenix, which I did in 78. I had taken my Norton on a day ride by myself and gone out Route 50, I think, towards Leesburg, and I think, and had a good ride. And I was coming back. Now, Route 50 at the time was 4 lanes divided, 2 lanes going that way, 2 lanes coming this way, huge grass median in between trees, shrubs, and you could see the cars, the traffic going each way. And there were crossovers every now and then for cross traffic and for changing directions. Anyway, I was booking down Route 50 pretty good. And all of a sudden, I passed a crossover and I looked in there, and there were like 6 Virginia State cop cars sitting in there. And on the far side, I could see a cop over there shooting radar at the cars coming this way. I said, "Boy, I sure am glad they aren't shooting it my way because they would have nailed me good." So I went on down the road, I guess 4, 5, 6, I don't know, 7 miles, just kept on going. And all of a sudden, on the far side coming at me was a group of hardcore Harley riders. And I'm going to guess 8, 10, 2 by 2, close formation. And they were booking. They were booking real good. It's a beautiful ride out there, and they were riding it hard. And I thought, oh, they're going to get nailed. And just about that time, I came to a crossover, so I did a hard left and a hard left and fell in behind them about a mile. I wrapped that Norton up around I don't know how fast at illegal speeds, and I caught up to them. And I went whew, right past them and got to the leader and laid in next to him. And so he's looking at me like I am a total idiot, which I was. But I started saying, slow down, slow down, slow down. He looked at me and he slowed down. And the whole group, we all dropped down to a nice, sane, exact speed limit speed. And about a mile and a half, 2 miles down the road, we just cruised right through that radar trap. It was great. And we got past that radar trap. There's a crossover coming up. I go this to the guy. He goes, to me. And I make a left, and I continue my trip on home. I thought that's a kind of a cool story. Okay, it's a neat story. Later on, I got to thinking, I wonder if those state cops knew they were coming. I wonder if that was an ambush. I wonder if I ruined it. And if it was, I hope I did. So anyway, that's story number one. That's the type of story I'm talking about. Let me tell you about story number two. This is cool because this is also a hardcore Harley story. In 1976, I was still living in Virginia, Sterling Park, Virginia. My good buddy Paul Custer and I decided we would ride our bikes, me on my Norton, he on his Honda 750. We would ride to Sturgis. And so we did. And we took little pup tents and camped out on the ground and all the kind of things you do when you're young and adventuresome. And about, I don't know, I don't even know where it was, but somewhere on that trip, we pulled into a campsite one evening, campgrounds, and headed for the office. And I looked over to the side, and there were about 6 guys in bikes, and a whole bunch of guys were kneeling down next to this Harley chopper, and they were doing something. I'm working on doing something. I couldn't tell exactly what they were working on, but they were working hard. I said, all right. So I go in we go in the office, we get our campsite, and we come back out, and I'm curious, so I meander over. These are scary guys, but I meander over, and I say, what's happening, guys? And he said, oh, we broke a primary chain on this bike. It's a single row chain, and we were able to get a length of chain down at the hardware store, but it's too long, and we're trying to shorten it. We're sitting here filing with a file about this big, filing on that chain, trying to get the chain shortened. And I said, oh, you want a chain breaker? And they looked at me like, yeah. So I went over to my bike and toolkit and I took out my Little Beaver chain breaker. It's a little thing about that big. Little Beaver chain breaker. I don't even know if they still make them. I got to Google it sometime. And I took it over to him. I gave it to him. And I said, look, we got a spot down the hill here, about 6 spots down. Bring it on down when you're done. So we rode on down to our campsite and set up our little pup tents, and we were just getting ready to do something. I don't know what all. And I said to myself, that's the last I'll ever see of that chain breaker. But what the heck? What the heck? It's c'est la vie, c'est la vie. And about that time, you hear the thunder. And here come these Harley guys down the hill. And they came down and they stopped. A guy got off, came over, handed me my chain breaker, said, thank you very much. Got you a 6-pack of beer as a thank you. And then they climbed on their Harleys and rode back out. I thought that was so cool. Good guys. So anyway, that's just 2 stories. I've got probably 20 or 30 more that are just as interesting. I've been riding a long time. So once again, think about telling me a story. And on any technology you want, send it to me. I'll put them together. I wrote a book. Let me see if I have a copy. Yep. Oh gosh. This is Motorcycle Arizona. It's my book. I wrote it, and it's published by Golden West Publishers here in Phoenix. So I'm on their list of authors. I'm on an authors list. So I'll take what you send me and work with it and see if we can't come up with a book or at least maybe a magazine article. I've written a lot of those, and I'd like this. I think this could be a lot of fun. So anyway, if you want to, tell me a story. Hmm.